Story 1. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. The rain was relentless that night, a ceaseless curtain of water that blurred the highway into streaks of gray and silver. Daniel squinted through his windshield, the wipers beating a frantic rhythm that never seemed to catch up. The clock on the dashboard glowed past midnight. He'd been driving for hours, fighting the hypnotic pull of the road and the steady drumming of the storm. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his tired eyes darting between the road and the faint halo of his headlights. He wasn't supposed to be out here. His original plan had been to leave in the morning, but a last-minute call from work had forced him to take the late-night drive across the state. The highway stretched endlessly, empty but for the occasional reflector post catching the beams of his car. It was the kind of night where loneliness pressed heavy on the chest, the silence between thunderclaps unnerving. Then, through the watery blur, Daniel saw her. A figure stood at the edge of the road, illuminated suddenly in the headlights. A young woman, drenched to the bone, her thin white dress plastered to her body. She held one hand out, palm open, in a pleading gesture. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought she was some trick of the storeman illusion carved by fatigue and rain. But the way she shivered, her hair plastered against her pale face, erased that thought. Against his better judgment, Daniel slowed. The car fishtailed slightly on the slick asphalt, before coming to a stop beside her. He leaned across and rolled the window down a crack. "Hey, do you need a ride?" She nodded quickly, her lips pressed tight. He unlocked the door and she slipped inside, dripping water onto the seat. The smell of rain and earth filled the car. She folded her arms across her chest, trembling. "Where are you headed?" Daniel asked, trying to sound casual, though unease prickled the back of his neck. She gave him an address. It wasn't far, maybe 15 minutes down the road, in a small town he'd be passing through anyway. "Rough night to be out walking," Daniel said. She didn't answer. Her eyes, wide and glistening, were fixed on the windshield. In the glow of the dashboard, her skin seemed almost translucent, as though the storm had drained her of color. He tried again. "You live around here?" "Home," she murmured. The word was barely audible over the patter of rain. Daniel forced a smile and focused on the road. For several minutes, the only sounds were the storm and the hum of the engine. Still, he felt her presence beside him, the way one can sense a shadow even without looking. At one point, he dared a glance at her. She was staring at her hands, twisting them together as though in silent prayer. Lightning flared, briefly filling the car with harsh white light. In that instant, her face seemed hollow, almost skeletal, and Daniel nearly swerved. But when he blinked, she looked normal again. She's pale, just tired. He told himself his mind was playing tricks in the storm. The minutes crawled by. Finally, the GPS directed him onto a narrow street lined with old houses. He slowed, searching for the number she had given. "This it?" he asked, pulling up to a faded two-story home with a sagging porch. The yard was overgrown, weeds swallowing the path to the front steps. Silence. Daniel turned his head and his blood froze. The passenger seat was empty. The door hadn't opened. The seatbelt was still fastened, yet she was gone. Only the damp imprint of her body on the upholstery remained, water soaking into the fabric. His breath quickened. He told himself maybe she had slipped out without him noticing, though the absurdity of the thought made his skin crawl. Heart pounding, he climbed out and splashed through puddles to the porch. He hesitated, then knocked on the weather-worn door. After a moment, an elderly man appeared, his face etched with the lines of long years. His eyes, though tired, sharpened when Daniel stammered out his story. I picked up a girl. She said this was her address. She just vanished before I stopped the car." The old man's expression shifted, a shadow passing across his features. He turned his head and called softly into the house. An older woman shuffled forward, her hands trembling as she clutched a shawl around her shoulders. "What did she look like?" she asked, voice quivering. Daniel described her soaked white dress, the long dark hair, the silent sorrow in her eyes. The couple exchanged a glance heavy with grief. The woman's eyes glistened as she whispered, "That was our daughter." Daniel's mouth went dry. "She died," the man said, his voice rough but steady. 20 years ago. On this very road. Car accident. In the rain. She's been seen before. People stop, thinking they're helping, but she never makes it home." Daniel stumbled back, the words echoing in his skull. He muttered an apology, though, for what he couldn't say, and turned toward his car. His body felt ice cold despite the rain soaking his jacket. When he slid into the driver's seat, he gripped the steering wheel with shaking hands, and that was when he saw it, faint but undeniable. On the inside of the passenger side window, smeared against the glass, was the clear impression of a hand, small, delicate, fingers spread wide as though pressing desperately for release. Droplets of water still trickled from the print. Daniel stared, his pulse roaring in his ears. The seat was empty, but the evidence remained. She had been there. With a strangled gasp, he started the engine and pulled away, the house shrinking into darkness behind him. Yet for miles down the road, he could not shake the feeling that the girl was still with him, her unseen eyes fixed on the endless highway. And each time the thunder cracked, he swore he heard her whisper that single word again: home. Story 2. The night shift at the abandoned hospital. Ethan had worked security jobs for years: warehouses, shopping malls, construction sites, but this assignment was different. The hospital had been shut down for almost a decade, its windows boarded and its halls empty, waiting for demolition crews. The agency told him it was easy money: just patrol the property, keep out trespassers, and sit in the security office watching the monitors until morning. Easy, or so they said. The hospital loomed in the night as he pulled up. Its jagged silhouette rose against the sky, brick walls stained black from weather and neglect. A single floodlight lit the entrance, throwing long shadows across the cracked parking lot. Ethan parked, grabbed his flashlight, and swiped his keycard to enter. Inside, the smell hit him immediately: mildew, dust, and something metallic, faint but sharp, like dried blood. The fluorescent lights in the lobby flickered as he powered them on. He told himself it was just age, just bad wiring. The security office was on the first floor, tucked beside what used to be the nurse's station. The room was cramped, with a bank of old CCTV monitors stacked along one wall. Most showed black and white images of empty corridors, stairwells, and the entrance gates outside. A single chair, worn and squeaking, sat before them. Ethan settled in for what he thought would be a long, boring night. For the first hour, nothing happened. He drank his coffee, checked his phone, and listened to the building groan in the wind. The monitors showed only shadows stretching across empty halls. Occasionally, dust drifted through the air, glowing faintly in the grainy cameras. Then, at 1:17 a.m., the sound came. At first, it was distant, muffled, almost mistaken for the rain outside. A faint squeaking, like wheels rolling across tile. Ethan leaned forward, frowning. It grew louder, echoing down the hall, outside the office. He knew that sound. He'd heard it before when his mother was hospitalized years ago. A gurney, the monitors confirmed it. On the feed for Corridor B, a shape moved slowly through the camera's view. The grainy footage showed a wheeled stretcher rolling on its own, swaying slightly as though guided by invisible hands. No one pushed it. Ethan blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, then looked again. The gurney was gone. He swallowed, his throat dry. Old wiring, he muttered to himself. Glitch in the system. But minutes later, another sound joined the silence. A burst of static over the intercom system. The building's PA system had been disconnected, or so he'd been told. Yet now, faint and broken, a woman's voice crackled through. Code blue. Room. Please respond. The words warped, drowned in static, then cut off. Ethan's heart hammered. He stood, flashlight in hand, and forced himself to step into the hallway. His boots echoed sharply on the tile as he moved, every shadow stretching unnaturally long in the flickering lights. The hospital was a maze of peeling paint and abandoned equipment. Gurneys lined against the walls like skeletal remains. He checked Corridor B empty. The air was freezing, his breath visible. A sound drifted down the hall, crying, soft, muffled, like a child trying not to be heard. It came from the direction of the pediatric ward. Against his instincts, Ethan followed. The ward's double doors groaned as he pushed them open. Inside, rows of tiny beds lay in dust, sheets moth-eaten and brittle. Murals of smiling animals faded on the walls, their cheerful colors dulled by decay. The crying grew louder, echoing from the far corner. "Hello," Ethan called, his voice trembling. "This is private property. You need to come out." The crying stopped. Silence pressed heavy on the room. He swung his flashlight beam, heart pounding, and caught movement of figure darting behind a bed. He rushed forward, but the corner was empty. Only dust swirled where someone might have stood. Then, all at once, every toy in the room, plastic rattles, rubber balls, a forgotten music box clattered to life. The music box chimed a slow, warped lullaby as if played underwater. The sound rose and filled the room, drowning Ethan in its haunting melody. He staggered back, flashlight trembling in his hand, and in that moment, he saw her. On the far side of the ward, a girl stood barefoot in a hospital gown, her long hair damp, plastered to her face. Her eyes were hollow black pits. She raised one arm and pointed directly at him. Ethan turned and bolted. His boots thundered down the halls as he sprinted back toward the security office. His lungs burned, his pulse deafening in his ears. Behind him he heard footsteps, dozens of them, as though a crowd gave chase. Every monitor he passed flickered to life, showing glimpses of figures, patients in gowns, nurses with blurred faces, all staring at him from the screens. He burst into the office, slammed the door, and locked it. Gasping, he backed against the desk. The monitors glowed, each one now showing the same image. The girl from the ward, her face close to the camera, lips moving soundlessly. The lights flickered, the room dropped into darkness, and then a hand touched his shoulder, cold, wet, unmistakably real. Ethan screamed. When his co-workers arrived at dawn, they found him slumped in the office chair, unconscious. His uniform was damp, as though he'd been standing in the rain. When he woke hours later in the hospital across town, he refused to return. But in the nights that followed, when he tried to sleep, he swore he could still hear it. The squeak of gurney wheels rolling just outside his door. Story 3. The cabin in the woods that shouldn't exist. The forest was deeper than they expected. When Jamie suggested the weekend hike, everyone had laughed at the idea of roughing it without cell service. But after weeks of stress at work and classes, the idea of disappearing into nature had its appeal. So here they were, Jamie, his girlfriend Claire, their friend Marcus, and Lena, who tagged along last-minute trudging down a narrow trail that cut into the wilderness like a forgotten scar. The late afternoon sun was already sinking, its light breaking into slivers between the trees. The forest was dense, the air thick with damp earth and pine. Every so often, the group stopped to check Jamie's compass and paper map because GPS had long since given up. "Are you sure this trail's on the map?" Marcus asked, adjusting his pack. "Feels like we're walking into nowhere." Jamie forced a grin. "It loops around. We'll find a good spot to camp." But the trail didn't loop. It twisted, sloped downward, and eventually vanished into undergrowth. By the time they realized they'd strayed too far, the forest had grown dim, shadows pooling under the branches. That was when they saw it. The cabin stood in a clearing they hadn't noticed from the trail. Its roof sagged, shingles black with moss, but the structure was intact. Smoke thin, almost imperceptible, curled from a crooked chimney. "Wait," Lena whispered. "I thought you said this area was deserted." "It is," Jamie said, though uncertainty crept into his tone. He unfolded the map again, tracing the lines with his finger. "There's nothing marked here." Claire hugged herself, shivering despite the mild evening air. "Maybe we should head back." But Marcus was already walking toward the cabin. "What? And hike in the dark? Screw that. If someone lives here, maybe they'll let us crash for the night." The others followed reluctantly. As they approached, the details sharpened, the wooden steps worn smooth, the windows streaked with grime, the front door slightly ajar. "Hello," Jamie called, pushing the door wider. No answer. Inside, the cabin smelled of smoke and something sour, like meat gone bad, yet the space looked disturbingly lived in. A table sat in the center, set with chipped plates. A candle flickered, its wax pulled fresh. Dust coated the shelves, but the chairs bore no dust at all, as if recently moved. "This doesn't make sense," Claire whispered. "Who lights a candle and just leaves?" Lena drifted to the fireplace, where a low flame still burned. She bent down, frowning. "This wood's fresh. Someone was here." Marcus chuckled, though his voice wavered. "Maybe they're out chopping more." Jamie moved to the corner, where a journal lay on the table. Its leather cover was cracked, the pages yellowed. He flipped it open. The handwriting was jagged, frantic. He read aloud. "They won't let me leave. Every time I step outside, the trees turn me back. The forest shifts, paths change. The cabin is always here. I hear them scratching in the walls at night. The cabin wants to keep us." Jamie's throat tightened. He shut the journal quickly. "It's just a story, some crazy hermit." But then came the sound, scratching, faint at first, then sharper, claws raking along wood. It came from inside the walls. Claire stepped back, her face pale. "Tell me you hear that." I ordered. The sound crawled around the room, circling, moving too fast to belong to anything natural. Jamie grabbed his pack. "We're leaving now." They rushed outside into the clearing, but something had changed. The trail they'd come from was gone. Where there had been a gap in the trees, there was only dense forest, branches tangled like prison bars. Marcus cursed under his breath. "We came from right there. Maybe we're turned around," Lena said, though her voice was hollow. They tried anyway, pushing into the woods. The deeper they went, the darker it grew, as though night was falling too quickly. The trees closed in, their branches snagging at clothes and hair. When they broke through into another clearing, they froze. The cabin stood there again, waiting. "No," Claire whispered, tears in her eyes. That's impossible. Jamie dropped his pack and stumbled back. We walked straight. How are we back here? The door creaked open slowly, though no one touched it. A gust of wind carried the smell of smoke and rot. From inside came a low rhythmic sound like breathing. Lena's hand flew to her mouth. It wants us to go back inside. But Marcus shook his head violently. No, no way. I'm not stepping foot in there again. He turned and bolted into the trees. Marcus! Jamie shouted, chasing after him. Claire and Lena followed. Branches whipped their faces. Roots caught their boots. But they ran blindly until their lungs burned. Finally, they burst into another clearing. Relief flickered until it died in their throats. The cabin. This time the door was wide open. The candle inside still burned. And carved freshly into the wood of the porch was Marcus's name, gouged deep. The edges raw, but Marcus himself was gone. Claire screamed. Jamie pulled her close, trembling as much as she was. We will find another way, he stammered. The scratching started again, louder this time, rising from the walls, the ground, the trees themselves. The forest seemed alive with it, closing in. Then, faintly, from inside the cabin, Marcus's voice called out, "Guys, I'm here, come inside, please." It was thin, strained, but unmistakable. "No," Lena whispered, backing away. "That's not him. That's not him anymore." The others didn't move. They couldn't. Their feet felt rooted, their eyes drawn helplessly to the open doorway. The candle's flame flickered, casting long shadows that reached outward, stretching like fingers toward them. And for the first time, Jamie understood the journal's warning. The cabin didn't just exist, it waited, and it never let anyone leave. Story 4. The haunted doll from the attic. The house smelled of dust and old wood, the kind of scent that clings to clothes and hair. When the Foster family moved into the Victorian home, they told themselves the creaks and groans were just part of the charm. The place had stood for more than a century. Of course it would have quirks. For the first few days, life settled into a normal rhythm. Mark and Evelyn unpacked boxes downstairs, while their 8-year-old daughter, Lily, explored every nook with the curiosity only children have. The house was enormous, filled with twisting hallways and narrow staircases, and Lily treated it like her own castle. One afternoon, while climbing into the attic, she found the attic was dim, the only light seeping through cracks in the roof. Dust motes floated in the air, disturbed by Lily's small footsteps. In the far corner, tucked inside a half-rotted trunk, she saw it, a porcelain doll. Its dress was yellowed with age, lace fraying at the edges. Its glass eyes were cracked, one slightly askew, giving it a crooked stare. Lily lifted it with both hands, brushing dirt from its face. Despite the cracks, it almost seemed to smile. When Evelyn came upstairs later, she found her daughter cradling the doll. "Where did you get that?" Evelyn asked, her voice sharper than intended. "In the box," Lily said simply. "She was waiting for me." Evelyn frowned, but let it go. Kids latched onto strange things. A doll from the attic was harmless, or so she thought. That night, Lily insisted on keeping the doll in her bed. Evelyn tried to convince her to leave it on the dresser, but Lily grew unusually upset, clutching it tightly. Reluctantly, Evelyn gave in. Hours later, Evelyn awoke to soft whispers. At first, she thought it was the wind slipping through the old windows, but then she realized the sound came from Lily's room. She crept to the doorway, heart hammering. Lily was sitting upright in bed, doll in her lap. Her eyes were closed, as though sleep-talking. Her voice was soft, murmuring words Evelyn couldn't make out. "Sweetheart," Evelyn whispered. Lily's eyes snapped open. She blinked, confused. "Mum, I was talking to her. She says her name is Annabelle." Evelyn's skin prickled. The days that followed grew stranger. The doll appeared in places no one left it, propped at the dining table, sitting on the couch, resting in the hallway. Evelyn accused Lily of moving it, but her daughter swore she hadn't. "I think she walks when we're asleep," Lily said once, stroking the doll's cracked porcelain cheek. Mark dismissed it all as imagination, but Evelyn felt the house tightening around them, the way silence lingered too long after dusk. Then the accidents began. One morning, Mark found the bathroom mirror shattered, shards scattered across the floor like ice. No one had touched it. Another night, the kitchen lights flickered violently until the bulbs burst, glass raining onto the counters. And once, when Evelyn carried laundry upstairs, the attic door creaked open on its own. From the darkness above came the faint sound of giggling. She tried to tell herself it was the house, just old wood and bad wiring, but deep down she knew better. The breaking point came when Evelyn walked into Lily's room and found her daughter sitting on the floor, whispering again. The doll sat opposite her, its head tilted unnaturally far to the side. "What are you doing, honey?" Evelyn asked carefully. "She's teaching me," Lily said, her voice distant. "Teaching you what? How to stay." The way she said it flat emotionless sent a chill through Evelyn. She stepped forward, reaching for the doll, but as her fingers touched the porcelain, the room plunged cold. The overhead light flickered, and Lily screamed, "Don't touch her, she doesn't like it." The doll's head jerked slightly on its own. Evelyn dropped it with a gasp. That night, Evelyn convinced Mark to help her. "We have to get rid of it," she insisted. Mark rolled his eyes. "It's a doll." Lily's just before he could finish. They heard a crash upstairs. Both ran to Lily's room. The window was wide open, curtains whipping in the wind. Lily was gone. On the floor where the doll had been, new words were scratched deep into the wood. "She's mine." Panic consumed them. They searched every corner of the house, shouting Lily's name, but only echoes answered. Finally, they returned to the attic, dread pressing down with every step. There, in the far corner, sat the doll. Its cracked eyes gleamed in the faint light, and in its porcelain hands lay a strand of Lily's hair, tied neatly with a ribbon. Carved into the doll's back was a new name. Lily. Evelyn collapsed. Sobbing, Mark grabbed the doll in fury and hurled it into the fireplace downstairs. The flames licked at its dress, blackening the porcelain. For a moment, they thought it was over. Then the doll's head turned inside the fire. Its grin widened. The flames sputtered out, leaving only smoke. The doll sat in the ashes, untouched. They locked it away after that, sealing it in a wooden chest with chains. Evelyn prayed it would be enough. But some nights, when the house grew too quiet, they heard small footsteps patter across the upstairs hall. And sometimes, faintly, Evelyn swore she heard her daughter's voice, not Lily's living voice, but something hollow, echoing from the doll's glass mouth. "Mummy, come play with me." Story 5. The hotel room that doesn't exist. The storm had caught him by surprise. Anthony hated driving at night, but the rain was so heavy the wipers couldn't keep up, and the road blurred into a silver smear. Exhausted from hours behind the wheel, he spotted the glowing sign like a beacon. The Crestwood in a squat, aging hotel, but it promised shelter from the storm. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of mildew and cleaning chemicals. A young receptionist sat behind the counter, her pale face lit by the computer screen. She looked up as Anthony approached, brushing damp hair from his forehead. "Rough night," she said, her voice flat. "Yeah," Anthony replied with a weary laugh. "Just need a room until morning." She hesitated a second longer than necessary, then slid a key across the counter. The brass tag read, "Room 6, top floor," she said quietly. Anthony frowned. The hotel didn't look big enough for multiple floors, but exhaustion outweighed curiosity. He thanked her, grabbed his bag, and trudged up the narrow staircase. The hallway was long and dim, the carpet worn thin. Most of the doors bore numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, but he noticed gaps, like something was missing. At the very end stood room 6. Its door was darker than the others, the brass knob tarnished. He slid the key in, and the door opened with surprising ease. The room smelled faintly of damp earth. The wallpaper was faded, peeling at the edges, and the carpet was stained dark in uneven blotches. A queen-sized bed sat against the far wall, sheets neatly tucked but yellowed with age. Anthony set his bag down and sank onto the mattress. It groaned under his weight. He told himself it was just one night. He would sleep, wake early, and be gone before sunrise, but sleep didn't come. At first it was the cold. The heater rattled but never warmed the air. Anthony pulled the blanket tighter, but the chill seemed to seep through his skin. Then came the sound, scratching in the walls, faint but constant, like nails dragging against wood. He sat up, heart thumping. "Mice," he whispered, "just mice." But then the whispering started. It came from the corner near the bathroom, low and steady, as though someone stood just out of sight. He strained to hear, the words indistinct. He grabbed his phone and shone its light, but the corner was empty. "Long day," he muttered. "I'm just tired." But when he turned back toward the bed, he froze. The sheets were rumpled as though someone had just risen from the other side. Anthony bolted for the door. The knob was ice cold beneath his hand. He twisted, pulled nothing. The lock wouldn't budge. Panic surged. He twisted harder until the metal creaked, but the door stayed shut. The whispering grew louder, circling the room. The bathroom door rattled, hinges groaning. Slowly, it creaked open. Anthony's flashlight beam caught the doorframe in claw marks, deep gouges etched into the wood, as though something had tried desperately to claw its way out. A sickly stench wafted from inside, coppery and sweet. He gagged, backing away. The bathroom light flickered on by itself. In the cracked mirror above the sink, he saw movement, a shape, hunched and blurred, shifting just behind him. He spun around, nothing there, but when he turned back, the mirror showed something that made his blood run cold. Himself, standing in the room, but his reflection wasn't moving. It just stood there, grinning. Anthony stumbled back, knocking over the nightstand. The lamp crashed, plunging the room into darkness. Only the whispering remained, now a chorus of voices, rising and falling in feverish chants. The air thickened, pressing down on his chest. He grabbed his bag and lunged for the window. Rain battered the glass, but outside was wrong. The parking lot wasn't there. Instead, he saw endless hallways, lit by dim bulbs, stretching into blackness. "Get me out," he whispered, his voice cracking. Behind him, the bed creaked. Slowly, as though someone or something was sitting down, the mattress sagged, indenting, though it was visibly empty. Anthony screamed, slamming his fists against the window. The glass cracked but didn't break. The whispering swelled until it was deafening, then cut off all at once. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. And then, in the stillness, a voice whispered right into his ear, "You shouldn't be here. Room 6 doesn't exist." When the sun rose, the maid knocked on room 6 to clean. No one answered. When she finally unlocked the door, the room was spotless, bed made, bathroom empty, no sign anyone had ever been there. Downstairs, Anthony's car sat abandoned in the lot, keys still in the ignition. When police checked the hotel's registry, they found no record of him checking in. Stranger still, the Crestwood Inn had never had a room 6. The space where the door should be was just a stretch of wallpaper. But sometimes, late at night, guests swore they saw a man wandering the halls wet from the rain, clutching a bag, looking for a room that wasn't there.